Okay, so what we're doing here is looking at gait analysis. So we're going to do a number of what we call excursion tests and looking at different ways of modifying our gait, which is essentially the way we move. So in this case, we're going to look at walking gait. So the first thing we're going to do is just get our client to walk normally. Now, using the chart in your course, just use the box to describe what you see, anything that you think is out of sync or anything that doesn't quite look right. So if there's a discrepancy between left and right sides, you see something that looks a bit clunky or disjointed, just make a note of it and we can go through what that means later on. So all I want you to do, Sam, is if you can just walk up and down in a straight line. So we don't tell our client anything other than just walk up and down. We don't want to put the idea in their head of what's wrong because then they'll cheat. Okay, come back. So what we are looking for here is how well the ankles move. If there's any discrepancy with the wide or the width of the steps, if we just go one more time, we can look at if there's anything left to right, so are they kind of walking like this? And it takes a trained eye, so it's a case of looking through this in slow motion if you need to, using the slow down function on YouTube. Okay, what we're going to get you to do now is a crossover walk, which is essentially one foot crossing over, then the other one. And what we're testing for here is adduction, so the ability for one to come across the other. So if our client is lacking adduction in one side, you might see this on the left where it's lacking, and you might see this on the right where there's loads of it. Also pay attention to where the foot lands, because you might have this happening or this happening, and you're looking for symmetry all the way through. Okay, so if you want to go through that one. So we're looking at how quickly the one leg crosses the other, and then come back. Look at the landing to see if there's an evenness about it. Okay, just one more time there and back. So I can see on this, Sam is better with his right leg than he is on his left. That means he's lacking a little bit of adduction when he comes left across. So that might suggest that his adductors are particularly tight on his left side, and his left glute his adductors are particularly weak on his left side, and his left glute is stronger because that's the opposite muscle. Okay, so what we want to do now is a wide stance, so as wide as you can, and kind of like walk staying in that wide hip position. So if you just turn to your left slightly and go towards that log over there, that's it. Okay, come back. Any differences in any of that? Does that feel okay? Let's go one more time. Okay, there is a few small things, but there's nothing too much going on there. I would just say the right one is a little bit slower in getting to the step, but we can look at that later. Okay, the next one I would like you to do is an internally rotated walk. So you're going to walk with your feet turned in, and you're going to walk like this. So it looks a little bit funny, but this is testing for internal rotation symmetry in the hips. Turn them in. One more time there and back. Just go to your right a little bit. That's it. Okay, just stop there, pause there. So what we found on his left is his left doesn't like to internally rotate because his foot is quite neutral. And when he does internally rotate, he comes back this way because his glutes, his external rotators, are starting to take over. That means he's got an external rotation dominance in the glute, and his internal rotations are comparatively weak, meaning you need to stretch the glute and strengthen the muscles that internally rotate the hip, like the TFL, for example. Okay, so we just go back. Okay, good work. Okay, so that one's internal rotation. You might have picked up some other things at the foot as well. We're now going to look at external rotation, so it's not quite wide like that, it's feet turned out as much as you can. Walk in that position. Okay? Okay, that's fine, come back. What you often get with clients here is they'll tell you they've got a bit of a niggle going on one of their hips if one of them doesn't want to come through, or they will try and, instead of coming out, this foot will end up coming back in like this every other step. So if you just go one more time there and back. So what we've done by putting the hips in external rotation is we've got the glutes to do the majority of the work. So this will pick up any glute weakness or asymmetry between the two. Does that feel okay? Yeah? Okay, good stuff. The next one is called a duck walk. So the duck walk tests for hip flexion. So flexion, the gap closing between the pelvis and the femur. So what we need to do is go into this position, and I want you to walk in that flexed hip position. Yeah? Just as you are, yeah, that's it. What we'll find is if one of them doesn't like it, he'll try and come into extension rather than stay in flexion. Okay, back. So to look here, we just need to look at the gap between the torso and the pelvis. We just go one more time. If there is particular tightness, especially with people who sit at a desk, they'll tell you straight away they don't like that position, or they'll end up in this position as opposed to a more upright position. So just pause there. So what we've got is a little bit of tightness in both because of his forward lean. Ideally we'd want our client in this position, so that just tells us that his hip flexors are a little bit tight, but that's perfectly normal. Or not, it's common, let's say, because of our jobs and sitting down quite a lot. Did you feel any restriction in any of that? No? It's all good? So anything in your feet? Okay, so you just go one more time. Forward. Yeah, forward. The other thing we need to look for is dorsiflexion of the foot. So here I can see his toes are coming up, it's fine. So there's no problem there because he's able to get into dorsiflexion. A lot of people who can't will end up really struggling to get through there and will feel a little bit of tightness through their shin and the top of their foot. Does that make sense? Yep. Okay, the next one is hip extension. So we're looking for the gap extending. So what we're going to do here is big steps to really get that movement through the hip. Big as you can, as big as you feel comfortable. Good. And this one's a really easy one to see because they won't land 9 times out of 10 in the same place at the same speed. Okay, you go again. You might need to get them to do it a few times to pick it up. What I can see on this one, his right one is better than his left one. Good, you've got good dorsiflexion through the foot, so obviously mobility for the ankle is quite good. If you were to get hip extension and you couldn't get your foot up, your foot would be planted like this. And you'd really struggle to get that and you'd get a lot more pain through the knee and the hip or discomfort. Okay, so what we've done there is abduction, adduction, normal walk. We did the normal walk first. Internal rotation is that one. External rotation is that one. Then we've got the flexion and extension. Now, if you don't have space in the gym, there's a couple of other ways to do this. So we call these static excursion tests. You're still moving, but they're more on the spot. So the first one is going to be for external rotation. So what we're going to do here, Sam, is feet shoulder width apart. And we're going to get you to turn the corner. So if you don't have the space to do this in a gym, get your client to stand here and you get them to rotate round. So you're going to look at the position of this foot and this foot. Make a mental note of where that foot is, where it's pointing, where that foot is pointing forward. Things you need to watch out for is this front foot will spin if they don't like external rotation in the front leg. And this other one, they might end up pronating or overpronating, and they might end up inverting or supinating on the other side. So you would compare that side to that side. So what you would look at is the difference between there, come back, and there, come back. Does that make sense?
Yeah, how far am I sticking out?
just as far as you feel comfortable. What feels normal to you? Yeah, okay. Do a few. Same way. Alternate if you can. Yeah. Yeah, so go for 5 on each side. Doing it statically also allows you to do it a bit slower because it allows you to pick up motion. So you've got your foot spinning out, okay? So don't worry. Good, so yeah, when he goes to right hip external rotation, his left foot spins out. Same on the other one. And we already know this from the other excursion test because we said that he prefers being in external rotation rather than internal rotation because his glutes are a little bit more dominant than his adductors. Okay. Other things you can look for is heel lifting. It can also be toe, so heel lifting could be over, so not being able to, what's it called, plantar flex. So it's different from person to person. Another thing you might see, if you can just go 2 more times on each side, is we can look at the thoracic spine. So is his spine lagging when it goes round or is it smooth? So here he goes round and then there's a bit of a drag, which is on his thoracic. And on that side there's the same again. So there's a little bit of tightness in rotation in the thoracic spine. But otherwise that was generally okay. Okay, this time we're going to do internal rotation. So internal rotation is the opposite. You're going to make a T shape with your feet. So we're looking for an ideal T. Back foot facing forwards, other one teeing it off. So T is in that. Other side, same thing. Okay, just wherever you feel natural. Yeah. Yeah, so as we can see, he doesn't like coming round fully. He still wants to be externally rotated. So where his foot is there, the angle's facing that way. Ideally, we'd want it this way if we had proper internal rotation. And you can see from the back foot, he likes to spin out into external again. But again, all of these tests just reinforce what we've already seen, that over-dominance of external rotators. Which isn't a bad thing because for a lot of people, they usually have weaker external rotators and stronger internal rotators. And I know Sam trains his glutes quite a lot. Okay, fine. For flexion, what we're going to get you to do, Sam, is step forward. Just step forward and then go down to tie your laces. And we're going to look at the gap between here and here. So step forward, tie your laces, go as big as you can. Step forward, tie your laces, go as big as you can. And what we're looking for here is how quickly he gets down into that position, whether it looks the same on both sides, and whether there's any discomfort or pain. So let's look from foot movement, speed, landing. Slow down a little bit. So it seems fine at the feet. Starting to slightly move on that one, on the left, otherwise good. So let's look at the angle between here and here. Yeah, okay, so there's a slight variability between the two going left and right, but it's not loads, so it's nothing too much to worry about. Okay, looking at extension. So the excursion task for extension in standing is, let's go from here to here, step back, here to here. So what we're looking for is through here for the hip, but we're also looking for spine extension in the thoracic. If you've got a tight thoracic, a lot of people get to there and not be able to move because they're stuck in this position. So this is a double test because we're testing for hip extension and thoracic extension. Arm straight or whatever you want with your arms, or you're just using them to drive. Step forward, step backwards. Yeah, so we're looking at this hip here. Good, you can look at your hands if you want. So we're looking at that gap there and this gap here. Looking to see how much the foot moves, so the proprioceptive ability of the feet. Just a couple more. I would say the right one's a bit better. You can get into it a bit more because you're kind of using your spine to get into the left one rather than your hip. So that's what we call cheating. It's not a thing that clients can avoid sometimes, they'll get to the movement, but their body will find a different way to do it than optimal. So all that's happening here, going in slow motion, I'll get you to do it again, but in slow-mo. So just 2 more on each leg in slow-mo. So here, that's good length between there and there. He goes on the other side, gets to there, and then he has to use his spine to create the rest of the extension. So what we could do with there is working that hip extension through stretching the hip flexors. And maybe doing things like backward lunges as well, because they will help with that motion. Okay, so next ones, we've got AB and AD. So we're going to step across the body as far as you can, back to the middle, across the body as far as you can. So again, things we're looking out for: feet turning, either pronating or supinating, the gap. So if I can only get to here on one side, but I can get to there on the other side, you know there's a difference. Obviously then I went onto the outside of my foot. So you're looking for that. And we're looking for the speed that we get there as well. Okay? As far as I can. Yeah. Alright, yeah. Most of us will do, I did it, most of us will do what Sam's doing. Most of us will supinate or invert our foot. Yeah, so we're just seeing the same things we've seen: spinning out, turning onto the outside of the foot. So that would just suggest that Sam maybe runs on the outside of his foot or walks on the outside of his foot, so he's using his lateral calves a lot more than his medial calves. So the suggestions I would make here: let's work on internal rotation of the hip, but let's also work on that, getting the toe in running and walking gait to actually work so they can come out, so you're actually running through. So what it means as well is Sam's also, the same as me, at a slightly higher risk of an inversion sprain, because we tend to roll on the outside of our foot. It's quite common in a lot of people. Okay, the opposite of that test is going to be a step to the side. So it's a side lunge, as big as you can, and we're just going to look at the distance and the speed and the same things.
Low down as well, or
just normal? Yeah, just normal. Yes, we've got slight things going on the right one, a bit more going on the left ankle because it's moving quite a lot. So let's look at the range here. So let's go again. Big range on that side, that's good. Stop there. So what we've got again is that externally rotated foot. Let's look at this position. We want it to be a little bit more this way ideally. That one is externally rotated as well, but it's fine otherwise if you just do one more on each side. Hip motion's quite good, but if you look, we cheat to get there because Sam wants to drop in and pronate, okay, to get there. Okay, so what we've done so far is extension, abduction, adduction, external rotation, internal rotation, and flexion. Those are the excursion tests, standing if you don't have space for the hips, but a little bit of the spine as well. We're now going to look at the spine. So we're going to look at rotation in the transverse plane, flexion and extension in the sagittal plane, and lateral flexion in the frontal plane. So the first one, Sam, you just come in front of me, but I'll get you to face that way if you can. You just watch what I do. The first movement is going to be flexion and extension. So all I want you to do, actually if you turn side on for this one, yeah, so what we're going to do here is just completely drop the spine, or more like this, and we're going to see how far you can get in terms of flexion. Whatever you want, you just have to. Yeah, so spinal flexion, we're looking at the gap between the chest and the pelvis to close, so come back up, do that a few times. So what we also want to see is, can he get his head as close to his knees as possible, like he's trying to go into a curl. So that's not too bad. He's got a fair range of motion there. You're almost trying to tuck your head between your legs. Okay, that's cool. Obviously with this one, there's nothing to compare it to because it's not unilateral. You're doing the same thing all the way through. The opposite of that is extension. So what I want to be able to see here is without creating a huge curve in your lower back, we're not using your pelvis. I want to see, can you just use your arms and your eyes to drive thoracic extension through here? So keep your pelvis still. Thoracic extension is the gap between here and here. Yeah, and back. And we're looking for, does this extend without too much curve in the lordosis, because that means he's cheated. So that's all right. Keep going. So you're getting a bigger line through here. It's okay. It's like, it's not the worst thoracic extension we've seen. What we want to try and get is a little bit more of chin to the sky and drive. That's it, through there. We just had a little bit of lower back movement there. It's hard. It is hard to separate your thoracic from your lumbar unless we're actively mobile every day. Okay, that's cool. And all we're looking to try and improve that. You can use apps and stuff to track this. I know Spark Motion Pro is an app that's quite good for these things. Okay, so now we're going to look at rotation. So if you need to face this way for me, to put your hands out in front, so just watch me first. Keeping your hips still, we're going to rotate to the left and then rotate to the right. And what we're going to do is compare the difference between the two. If we use our hips, we're cheated. So we want to pin our hips. Good. But our hips also tell us if we're doing anything that might be causing restriction somewhere else. So if use that as a marker on this side. Yeah, he's further. I'll get out of the way. He's further on the left. And what we see on the right is, if you just do the right again, Sam, slow down. He gets to there, and then to get the extra range, he actually uses his hips to internally rotate this hip and externally rotate this hip to get extra range of motion. Now that's not motion of the thoracic, that's motion of the hips. So we need to make sure we're measuring just the movement of the spine. Now the way you can pin this to really do it is if you put your right foot in front of your left in a T, as much of a T as you can, and just rotate to the right. We've taken his ability to restrict himself out, and this is his true range of right thoracic rotation. So go again, same side. So as you can see here, he's not able to cheat that extra bit because we pinned him in his position. Good, okay, swap sides. So true on the left, so keep yourself in a T. Try and get your right foot more internally rotated if you can, yeah, cool. So now we're looking this way. As you can see, there is a difference because now look how much he's come round and his body position is completely changed going left. So he has got a left. He's better going left, but he cheats to get there as well because his hip position is completely different. Okay, thanks Sam. What we're going to do now is thoracic flexion, or lateral flexion rather, in the frontal plane, which is essentially a side bend. So we're not using our hips to drive the side bend, we're using just our spine. So as you can see, I'm not doing this with my hips, I'm pinning my hips and just causing a drop through here. So the way I can do this is either hands long and go this way and this way, or like this and like this. Does that make sense? Okay, so if you face this way for me, we're going to look at the back because it's easier. I would probably put your hands up for the purpose of this one, so up in the air, because then we can look at the hand position as well. So you want to pin the hips. Yeah, good. On the other side. So if I was just to nudge you and exaggerate, if his hips went, if this hip went this way, we know he's using his hips to cheat, but he's not at the moment. So there's his thoracic flexion. That's good. Or thoracic lateral flexion. And on this side, yeah, it's good. So go again on the left. Perfect. And on the right. So what you notice here on the right, he didn't drop straight down, he rotated round. And that backs up what we saw in the rotation, because he struggled to rotate left when we took the restriction of his hips. Or we restricted his hips and took his ability to cheat away. So what this means is, Sam favours rotating to the right, but he actually favours laterally flexing the same way as well. So if you go again. So that's like someone who plays tennis with his right hand and will drop down. So rotation phase for forehand or backhand. Be right-handed, I suppose. Yeah, so you can see from these things. So that cross-sectional pattern of that, or even a tennis serve, throw the ball up, you've still got lateral flexion rotation to the same side. Do you play golf? No, you don't play golf, but if that happened, you have the same thing through there. So it's quite common. What you do then is work on his rotation going the other way, so give him like a viper or a medicine ball, get him going that way, or give him rotational exercises that favour one side, and then stretch the other side. So stretching for lateral flexion is essentially that motion, yeah? Or if you were rotating, you would hold on to a bar and then rotate yourself around. Okay. But now what we're going to do is look at the feet. But I'm going to do that in a separate video because I'm going to have to change the camera angle. But what we covered there was the walking gait tests. Excuse the noise. The walking gait tests for the various motions at the hip. We've done the tests for flexion, extension, thoracic rotation and lateral flexion of the spine. Now we're going to look at the third body of the body, which is the foot and ankle. So that'll be on the